Hi there, my name is Philip Eidson. I want to welcome you to the Art of Procurement podcast, the podcast that helps you, a forward-thinking procurement professional, position yourself and your team to proactively take advantage of the revolution that's taking place in procurement today. By interviewing industry trailblazers and sharing insights from our own experiences, my team and I pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics, and tools that procurement teams are using to elevate their impact. Hi there, and welcome to this 4-part series from Art of Procurement in partnership with Sievo, where we look at how today's digital platforms and procurement capabilities can connect to support differentiated decision making, a core element of 10xing the impact of procurement. To wrap the series, I'm joined by Sammeli Sammalkorpi, the CEO and co-founder of Sievo, to bring the whole series together by looking at how procurement can cross the data to action gap. Now, Sammeli has dedicated the last 2 decades of his life to procurement analytics, and so I asked him, with that context, what does he see as the next frontier?
Is it that long already? I start to feel like pretty old grumpy guy here, but indeed, I guess that's the case. I think procurement analytics has come a long way from, let's say, static reports to drill down analytics with really, let's say, great UIs that really enable people in different roles to kind of work more effectively on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. But I think analytics really need to change now. It's not enough anymore to create, let's say, good-looking, effective, helpful dashboards, and it's not enough to, let's say, provide recommendations or insights. I think in the next 5 years, procurement analytics, I say other analytics overall, but for our purposes, specifically procurement, definitely needs to close the data to action gap. Mm-hmm. And what I mean with that is that increasingly procurement analytics needs to trigger actions as well. So I do see analytics as a sort of centerpiece that orchestrates actions across different kind of, let's say, more operational systems, be that ERPs, be that Negobots, be that simply emails to suppliers and so forth. Mm-hmm. Initially, a lot of that will happen, let's say, based on, let's say, approval by human beings. But as the systems get, let's say, more mature, and also as people get more confident with the recommendations, I think eventually that sort of human element will be taken out for certain kind of decisions, not all decisions, but certain kind of decisions. So really, the future of analytics for me is driving actions.
Mm. Now, how much progress have we made on the data quality issue? So when I think about, data driving actions, it always depends on the quality of the data that's driving those actions. And I think that's one of the things that's been the hardest for us as procurement teams, is to really trust the quality of our data. Do you see progress being made on that front?
I definitely see progress, but perhaps in different ways that a lot of people anticipated. I think there was this dream that one day our SAP or Oracle will have perfect master data, and when it has perfect master data, then imagine all the analytics we can do. That hasn't happened, and I don't think it's going to happen in the next 2 decades in procurement world. Instead, what has happened is that more and more processes have somehow digitalized. And as they are not on paper anymore, but they are email exchanges, they are video meetings, they are different kind of best-of-breed solutions. Sort of as a side impact of that, we have this digital footprint. Yeah. And this digital footprint creates a lot of data, which is very unstructured, very noisy, very messy data. But we just have 100-fold amounts of data available. That plus then combined with advances in machine learning, AI, and so forth, that can make sense out of this unstructured, noisy data. Means that suddenly, even though we didn't get the perfect SAP master data, we anyways have, let's say, capabilities to make sense out of data in completely new ways. So it's solved, but in completely different ways that people have perhaps expected.
So we talked about, the opportunity that is going to exist in terms of, that closing that data to action gap. Will automated decision-making then replace procurement professionals?
That's the question we always ask ourselves, isn't it? The short answer is no. Mm-hmm. I think sort of automated decision-making will be very different from human-based decision-making. It has different features. First of all, it's much more effective. A lazy person like me, I can do one decision per day, and it's a good day when I've made a decision. But of course, if we can automate decision making, that'll give us, let's say, 1 million decisions per day. So just the sort of time frame in which the decisions can be made is totally different. And also the flip side of that is, of course, the cost of decision making is completely different. So a human decision making will cost hundreds of euros per decision, whereas an automated decision making comes with a very, very small fraction of the cost. Which actually means that, yeah, in some cases we are replacing human decision making because whatever can be automated will be automated. But even more so, we will expand the scope of decision making to what I call a long tail of procurement decisions. It's those decisions that currently are not made at all because the value versus cost sort of equation is not there. Companies have tried to solve this by, let's say, offshoring or outsourcing these sort of kind of decisions. But I do see that as we get more automated decision making, we will further expand this scope and, of course, replace outsourced offshore decision making centers with that. So I really see it's a lot of boring decisions that provide perhaps very small added value, but as the cost is close to zero, it still makes sense to kind of make those decisions.
The compound effect of lots of those small decisions still adds up to a big impact. It's just that we can't get to them today because they're human decisions.
Exactly. And I also think it may change, for example, how we think about, let's say, long tail of suppliers, because sort of the mantra has been that we need to consolidate the supplier base because the process cost with the long tail is so big compared to the benefits. But suddenly, if the process cost goes close to zero, perhaps we are in the position that actually sort of a long tail of suppliers makes more sense. So it will change the way we think about our supplier base and processes in different ways. Of course, different categories are different. Strategic, direct materials, you probably don't go to that direction, but a lot of MRO, long tail, indirect, and so forth, you definitely want to go to that direction. It's about more decisions, but then I also believe there's a certain kind of a context in which the decision-making speed is of essence. So whenever there's a crisis, there was an earthquake in Turkey. That means that perhaps certain production plants take a hit, which means that some of your suppliers will have production or delivery problems. And it's not only you, it's all of your competition as well, or everybody in the same supply chain. Everybody's looking for alternative suppliers, sort of alternative logistics solutions and so forth. It's the ones who are quickest to react that actually kind of get the benefit. And in this kind of context, of course, automated decision-making, milliseconds, is completely different from human-based decision-making. So whenever you need a lot of decisions at low cost or you need quick decisions, automated decision-making will take over.
Now, do you see, so, you know, there's obviously been a lot of noise over the last 3 months or so around ChatGPT and chatbots. You know, as you think about, you know, the use cases that people have talked about that so far have been, you know, write me a blog post on this, or, you know, tell me about something else in this way. Now, I saw a really interesting use case yesterday, which was around, you know, you have your database. This is applying a ChatGPT kind of tool to an internal database where you're basically saying, tell me all the suppliers that are based in Turkey. And you type that in and all of a sudden you get all the reporting. Now, do you see that bringing its way into, you know, kind of the procurement world, and then that enabling that much faster decision making because you're essentially having a conversation with your data as opposed to having to go and try and find it?
Yeah, great question. And as it happens, we've also been, let's say, playing out with the ChatGPT and seeing sort of what are the use cases and benefits we could get out of it. Obviously, there will be a lot of use cases where tools like ChatGPT will provide tremendous help. Of course, they also are becoming a commodity. So everybody has access to them, which means sort of just having access to them will help you becoming more effective, but it doesn't provide you any competitive advantage. Sort of, and we also, for example, have been exactly asking this same kind of questions. This supplier of mine, which are the production plant locations of that supplier? Pretty much any information which is out there in the internet is available if you just know how to ask the right questions. I definitely believe the winning formula will be getting the external data with the help of this kind of tools, training these kind of tools with your internal data set as well. Again, it can be internal to your company. It can be providers' entire data ecosystem and so forth, but kind of asking the right questions from the internal data sets as well, and then really kind of combining internal and external to provide these actions and automate the actions. So I definitely believe these ChatGPT kind of tools will help all of us to structure the internal and external data assets.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see how it then helps us drive decision making by essentially putting all the data. Now you need to know where to look. You need to know the 5 steps it takes to go and find that, even if that data exists. But by asking a question, it can essentially go and fetch the information to you and deliver it to you to then not necessarily make the decision for you, but give you the information to help you better make a decision.
Absolutely.
Now, we talked a lot about actions and decisions actually requiring that underlying data. We touched on the data itself and data quality a little bit. How should procurement decision makers actually think about their procurement data assets?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of thought processes that I encourage our clients to kind of go through. The first is around this, what I already mentioned, sort of the digital data footprint. Previously, we thought that to have certain data to our decision making, we need to proactively collect that data, but increasingly that data is already there as a side product of different sort of processes and exchanges that we have. People in the sales context are very smart using that. For example, increasingly all the sales meetings that are held over Zooms or Teams also become sort of fuel for sales analytics, sort of what sort of tone of voice the customer is having and so forth. We are applying too little of that in the procurement side. So we need to really figure out what are the data assets actually available for us and how can we leverage that. So I think that sort of digital data footprint is one thought process. The second thought process I encourage our clients to have is sort of, do you want to maintain your own data, or is it something that you want to kind of purchase? For me, if I think of all the large enterprises out there, all of them have their vendor master databases. All of them are, let's say, cleansing and maintaining that vendor data. But eventually, it's pretty much 90% of that information. It's the same information across all of those databases. There will be players and providers who can provide this sort of centralized cleansed data as a service. So some of the data, like material specifications, probably is core to your business, and you should own that data set. Is the data around suppliers, their production plans, second-tier suppliers, is that data that you can and should own? Probably not. So think about make versus buy also in the data context. I think that's a kind of a second recommendation. The third recommendation would be that in the last 5 years, there really has been an explosion of different kind of software/data providers that provide data around risk or sustainability or carbon and so forth. Quite often they frame themselves as let's say software providers because they of course want to have users on their platform and they want to create this intimated sort of client relation. Quite often the true value of these providers is the underlying risk data or sustainability data and so forth that they provide. So when you engage with this kind of providers, I would ask myself the question, am I actually interested about the software, which may be the case sometimes, or whether I'm actually interested about the underlying data assets, which yields to completely different strategy in terms of how do you want to contract and get the access to data and so forth. And in that case, also be careful about, let's say, the contractual terms, who owns the data and so forth.
And so do you then think of it as being like the way that you engage and interact with that data being more platform driven? So it's all in kind of one place, but then there's you can upgrade the functionality of the platform by bringing in apps from, the risk data or the supply diversity data or the sustainability data or whatever it is into a common environment that all talks to each other, as opposed to it residing in separate kind of
and definitely for me it's really about this sort of data foundation layer or procurement information hub, procurement analytics hub, procurement data hub, however you want to call it. And the challenge is that there's a lot of, let's say, relevant procurement data which is supplier specific. There's a lot of relevant procurement data which is category or material specific, and there's a lot of, let's say, procurement data which is relevant for certain business units or understanding our internal business dynamics. But the challenge is that to make pretty much any procurement decision, you need to be able to link the supplier data into materials and categories, and then link that to end products and so forth. So you need to be able to link supplier data to material data to kind of end product data. But most of the data that's provided and that you can acquire is not linked. It's supplier data versus material data and so forth. So what you need to create is this procurement data hub that sort of brings these data elements together. And of course, you need to figure out how to link these different separate data sets. And the magic glue, this is a hidden secret. It is the purchase order transactions where you have material number, supplier number, and the business unit buying the stuff. That provides you sort of the way to link different data sets together. And when you can do that, then suddenly all the external supplier data, external commodity data starts to make more sense and be more relevant.
And you can pull it in based on that line item from external sources.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening in to today's episode, part of our 4-part podcast series focused on driving differentiated decision-making, one of our core pillars of 10x Procurement, in partnership with Sievo. To listen back to the entire series, go to artofprocurement.com/decision series. That's artofprocurement.com/decision series.